Part 24. They had almost died. Sarah was gripping the Bronco's dash, her heart hammering as the pinpoints of streetlight blurred by, experiencing a soul-wrenching déjà vu. They had almost died naked in each other's arms. The machine had tried to extinguish them, blindly and stupidly, for no reason as far as it was concerned, except instructions from another machine. And now she could see it coming on after them, a single headlight growing steadily larger in the rear-view mirror, almost as if it were growing there, like a tumour, to explode into the Bronco's cab. She hated it. Reese was breathing in and out in a mechanical, regular rhythm to get his body under control. He yanked the wheel, and Sarah slammed into the door as the Bronco broke contact with the road and described a rude-angled arc onto the freeway on-ramp. Then she was almost slammed back as Reese bottomed out the accelerator. The chase was so different this time. She was watching Reese operate now with a mixture of fear for him and pride. He maneuvered the Bronco into the fast lane in an instant. Traffic was light this far down the coast at this hour, a few lumbering 18-wheelers and even fewer cars heading south into San Diego. Reese wended through them masterfully, as though they were stationary objects. But then, so did their pursuer. In fact, the Terminator was continually gaining ground, moving closer in agonizingly small increments, like the inexorable and regular movement of a clock. Sarah stole a glance backward and started. The Terminator was right behind them, looming closer now that it was not artificially distanced by the distortion of the mirror. The thing was tucked over the handlebars to reduce air resistance, throttle rammed open, and now it was unslinging the assault rifle. Against the blast of the wind, the cyborg raised the weapon in a one-handed grip. The barrel was rock steady, aimed directly at her. "Down!" Reese shouted as he saw the gun coming up, but Sarah was already ducking. A second later, the back window of the Bronco shattered from the impact of the bullets. One stray shot ricocheted around the cab, embedding itself in the dash above Sarah. Close. Reese swerved the Bronco, diving for cover around a tractor-trailer. The Terminator leaned hard, right behind them, relentlessly closing the gap, missing the rear of the trailer by millimeters. Reese ripped the tires from the surface of the road by weaving, wraith-like, through the slow-moving traffic. People barely had time to register the objects that streaked around them. It was utter madness. And it got worse. Tires squealed as the back of a moving van loomed up. Synthetic flesh and metal knee ground into the road, maintaining balance in a 30-degree lean. Reese feinted right, then left, sliding towards a Greyhound bus in a four-wheel drift. The Terminator fired the assault rifle again. This time, the bullet struck the guardrail where the Bronco had been, a clear miss. The Bronco slipped around two parallel trucks and sped through the narrow space left by a night crew working on the divider fence. The Terminator saw that it would have to throttle back and change lanes to follow. It did not want to slow, it wanted to accelerate, so it chose a different path. It wrenched the cycle past the Winnebago down an off-ramp, and without slowing, ran a red light at the intersection and climbed back up onto the on-ramp. There was some wreckage in the cyborg's wake as cars swerved into each other to avoid hitting the insane motorcyclist. None of it mattered. It was just the Terminator and Sarah. Reese saw the Terminator roaring onto the freeway, the cyclopean glare of the Kawasaki's headlight bobbing back and forth in a tight pattern that would lead to the Bronco. "Change places!" Reese screamed over the hammering pistons of the V8. She slid under him as he kept the pedal glued to the floor. She grabbed the wheel and slipped her foot onto the accelerator. "Don't slow down," Reese said. "I won't," she answered, and there was conviction in her voice, a tone that was new to her and somehow very comforting. For an instant, Reese and Sarah locked eyes, and time froze. But then the Bronco grazed a Datsun 240Z, tearing off its side-view mirror, and time exploded into howling fragments. Sarah steeled her arms and turned the wheel the way Ginger would have done, getting the Bronco back on track. Reese began digging in the nylon bag for weapons. He trusted her to drive. Their lives were in each other's hands, literally. The Terminator shot through an open pocket of traffic and fired a short, disciplined burst at the Bronco. Bullets thudded into the rear panel. One took a chunk of rubber off the left rear tire, but the steel bands held. Sparks exploded and died. The Terminator gunned the cycle. Reese got the first pipe bomb out and held a Bic lighter under the fuse. Sarah yawed the truck onto the divider's shoulder, inches away from the fence, grimacing as she fought to hold the Bronco on an even track, as Matt would have. For the first time in her life, she was controlling her own fate, at 98 miles an hour. Reese got the fuse lit and leaned out of the passenger side. He watched the fuse sputter and smoke in the wind until it fitfully burned down to the end cap, then tossed it onto the road, right in the Terminator's path. The road erupted, geysering flame and smoke abruptly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost simultaneously, the concussion blew back Reese's hair, and the Terminator roared out of the rising cloud, undamaged. Too soon. Reese got another bomb. The AR-180 chattered again, tearing up the Bronco. Sarah feinted left, then right, her stomach protesting every radical move. Reese leaned out and waited for the fuse to burn down half an inch above the end cap. Then he let it go. It clattered onto the pavement and rolled like a crazed bowling pin, past the cyborg. There was another explosion, well behind the Terminator, which succeeded in terrifying the drivers in the wake of this impromptu urban combat. A black Corvette spun out, stopping crossways in its lane, only to be blown into splintered fiberglass by a fishtailing truck. Ahead, traffic was thinning out. That was bad. Less cover. The Terminator slung the AR-180, using its free hand to grope for the last magazine. In one rapid movement, it shoved the magazine into the assault rifle and whipped the weapon back into firing position. Meanwhile, Reese groped for another bomb. The Bronco sped around a chromed semi-milk tanker and accelerated into a long, tiled-lined underpass. As they entered the fluorescent-lighted tunnel, Reese lobbed another bomb. It clattered and bounced up into the air, slowing rapidly. The explosion thundered in the enclosed space. A wall of smoke formed behind them. They could hear the startled dinosaur howling of the semi's air horn, a chorus of tires screeching, and then a motorcycle punched a hole in the smoke. The Terminator fired at them. The side mirror exploded. Bullets furrowed along the Bronco, whining ominously. Two found Reese. He grunted, surprised, as the twin clubs of pain smashed into his chest and arm. The pipe in his hand dropped, fuse unlit, useless. Ironically, it end-overed into the Terminator's leg, tearing a chunk of flesh off the calf. Reese slumped over the door, half in and half out of the cab. "Kyle! Oh God, no!" Sarah lunged for him, dragging him back onto the seat, in the process slamming the Bronco into the far wall of the tunnel. Instinctively, she took her foot off the gas and went for the brake. Instead, Sarah fought the wheel and rode the wall for a moment, sanding off the paint past the primer coat, showering sparks. Sarah, listening to a new voice born of her union with Reese, smacked the accelerator again. The V8 sucked fuel, and Sarah slammed back as the Bronco churned out into the road, climbing quickly back to 90. But it was already too late. The Terminator had not slowed. It was 38 feet behind them. It aimed the AR-180 directly at the back of Sarah's head and depressed the trigger. The bullets did not shear off Sarah's head at the neck because the AR-180's magazine was expended. Without pausing, the Terminator dropped the assault rifle. Before it hit the ground, the Terminator had pulled the little nickel-plated .38 revolver from its jacket and triangulated on the back of Sarah's head, and fired. But Sarah chose that moment to feint left. The bullet demolished the mirror on her side, showering her with shards. Flinching, she lost control. The Bronco weaved right and left, beginning to drift. Then Sarah got it straightened out in a rush of controlled panic. But now the Terminator was coming alongside, aiming the huge pistol at her through those dark sunglasses, the bared eye pulsing red beneath the lens. It fired again. The bullet clanged through the cab and tore past her ear before shattering the windshield. The Terminator was her enemy. It had shot her lover. It wanted her death. And the fear inside Sarah was suddenly blown out by the blast of anger that erupted now, coursing into her arms. A very human expression of murderous rage distorted Sarah's face as she lifted her foot off the gas, slammed it down on the brake, and cranked the wheel. The Bronco slammed the motorcycle into a guardrail. It went down in an instant, smacking pavement, bouncing back up, toppling end over end, then dropping into a slide. Somewhere in there, the cyborg let go. The Bronco and the cycle shot out of the tunnel at 80 miles an hour. Something followed more slowly, rolling out of control and then going spread eagle to stabilize. The Terminator. Sarah was trying to see where it was when she drifted into the divider, locked the wheel in the wrong direction, and flipped the truck. The world upended, cartwheeling around the cab as Sarah and Reese were pressed against each other and the roof of the cab. Sarah's fear returned, but her scream was muffled by the crash of the Bronco slamming back to concrete and rolling onto its back. The Terminator hit a guardrail post and backflipped over the center divider. It hit the other side, rolling to a stop in the shadow of an overpass. Its leather jacket was smoking, and patches of skin had been scraped raw, as if it had been dragged over a cheese grater. But the machine stirred, then sat up. The Terminator turned at the demon roar of an air horn. Then it was struck by a Kenworth tractor trailer, which slammed into it at 70 miles an hour like an enormous flat iron. The cyborg disappeared under the truck, even as the air brakes began to scream. The trailer wheels locked in clouds of smoke as the Terminator tumbled, ricocheting viciously between the chassis housing blurring above it and the pavement beneath. The driver hadn't seen anything in his lane. The absolute shadow of the overpass had hidden the man-shaped mass there until his headlights were upon it, and by then it was too late. He was on the brakes in an instant, cutting in the jake and feathering the pedal to prevent the big rig from jackknifing, so that his load of 6,000 gallons of super unleaded wouldn't wind up covering an acre of freeway. His partner was thrown forward, waking up with a nasty start. "Son of a bitch!" they bellowed, not quite in unison. The two tanker trailers slewed and fishtailed like a derailing train. "Shit, I'm losing it," the driver thought. The body came up for a sickening instant before falling back to the pavement. They could hear it thunking up underneath, slamming around, and could feel the thuds as what they thought was bone smacked the undercarriage. They heard and felt all of this over the high-pitched squeal of locked tires on asphalt, over the shuddering rumble as the truck ground to a halt. The two men let out their breath slowly, daring to believe that somehow the driver had managed to get the wild machine stopped. They looked at each other, the colour gone from their faces. 6,000 gallons of super unleaded. Fuck. "Stay here," the driver said, and dropped out the driver's door. His partner just stared straight ahead, gripping the dash. The driver didn't want to look. But you never know, he thought. Maybe the guy is still alive. Oh God, wouldn't that be horrible? An agonized, pulverized basket case he had made. As he reached the second tanker trailer, he slowed down. It was up ahead, on the road. A blood smear. And was that a lump of clothing? Or flesh? Momentum carried him past the end of the second trailer and into the cyborg's hands.